And I am just a serial traveler. It is my favorite thing to do. It is my biggest hobby. It's what I always look forward to the most. And out of that hobby came a passion for sharing just different tips and tricks that I got along the way. As a budget traveler, that's really kind of my sub niche in traveling, because I believe that we all should be able to travel and that travel should be accessible. And that's really my mission. So I founded Roaming with Romie, which is just a travel platform where making travel accessible is at the center of everything I do. So it's really what I focus on when I post on Instagram, when I'm on YouTube, when I write blogs, when I'm just engaging in different communities. And that service is what really pushes me. And in addition to that, I also really focus on the history and culture of a place. I call it the socio-historical context of a destination. So that appears a lot in my writings and my content. So I have not kept count of the number of states and cities I've visited in the US. I've only kept track of countries. So if we're talking countries and not territories, because I've been to a few territories, but those don't count. But in terms of countries, I am now at, I think 41. I think I'm at 41 now. And I have some new countries that I'll be visiting this year. I've returned to some countries I've been before and had amazing experiences so far in 2023, but I'll be going to some new places in 2023. And I'm just absolutely stoked for that.
So just get us started, Romie. Like, how did you get into this? Where did this all start? What ticked off that travel bug? And I'm sure along the way you realized, okay, this can be a lot more affordable. This can be a lot more leisurely. This can be a little bit more luxurious, even maybe. Talk us through that journey for you.
Yeah, so my journey really started off as a small infant. So I got my first passport when I was 6 months old. And my mom would always tell me how it was so difficult to get that passport picture because I would not open my eyes and look at the camera lens. And the reason why I needed a passport so young was that I have siblings that live abroad and that lived abroad when my parents and I lived in Atlanta. So from a previous marriage, my mom had a family in Germany. And when she moved to the United States, she, the kids still stayed in Germany. So a lot of my childhood was spent getting on a plane to Frankfurt every summer and just being immersed with a culture whose language sounded different in a place that looked different with people that looked different for me. And I kind of got that exposure to a different experience much early on in my life. So in a way, it's kind of always been there. It's kind of always existed. Oh man, I wish. No, I don't speak German, unfortunately. And I should, because with the amount of family and family friends that I have in Germany, including my two really small nephews who still live outside of Frankfurt, who right now only speak German, I definitely have more of an impetus to learn German right now, but not yet. It is on the list. And so I went back and forth from the time I was a child until high school. And when I was in high school, a little older, about 16, 17, we would take those trips and then visit some nearby countries in Europe. So we would go to the Czech Republic, we would go to France, we spent some time in Belgium, and just kind of that whimsical nature of being this 16, 17-year-old walking down the streets of Paris. And I would pick out this little Madeline looking outfit and this little sailor shirt, I remember. And I felt the most alive during those memories and during those particular moments. So that was high school. Started college. I moved to New York City to go to undergrad and was just doing the regular college thing. And I start to notice a lot of the upperclassmen study abroad and post these amazing pictures on Instagram, because that's when Instagram really started to kick up. And I was just so inspired. I was like, oh, look at these people in Santorini, in Australia, people in London. And I'm just like, I want to do that. So ironically enough, it was seeing other people's pictures on Instagram that also inspired me to travel and post on Instagram. And I really credit those NYU classmates and their Instagram photos in Greece for being yet another impetus for traveling. So I wanted to be like them. So junior year, I was like, I'm going to study abroad. And I went to London to study abroad. And I was like, I'm going to go travel every other weekend and go to different countries like the upperclassmen. And that's exactly what I did. So in the fall of 2016, which was that semester, that's really when the travel bug bit me. And I was traveling, if not every weekend, every other weekend. And in just those 5 months alone, I might have went to maybe 7 different countries, if not more. And yeah, and it never stopped from there. I just was like, I want to experience so much of the world. I want to see these new things. I want to connect with different people. And it's just continued into really a lifestyle is a better way to describe it than a hobby. It's truly a lifestyle.
Like someone's posted on Instagram and that got you thinking, I want to see this, I want to see that. And then eventually you got through to figuring out, okay, this costs money, or okay, this might require a little bit more than I thought or expected, whether it's a language barrier, understanding how to get into countries. So let's just kind of get started into that conversation of what did you start learning initially when you got into this conversation?
I think part of the big reason why I love budget travel, and that's not to say budget travel can't be luxurious. I'll talk more about that later, but being a college student and not having a grown person income really contributed to learning how to travel in creative ways. And really, a lot of the things I learned just came from experience. It came from trial and error. So it was like, all right, I have this much money for my refund check. I got to budget out so when I was in London, actually, that semester when I just traveled like crazy, I actually would go to the ATM to withdraw pounds in paper cash so that I could stick to a budget per week while I was in London. So my groceries, my bus and train fare, anything that I would need for my day-to-day life while I was studying in London. And then I would simply just, use the rest on travel. Now, of course, as an adult, I have a much different system when it comes to being able to fund my travels because I have bills and, other type of grown-up financial responsibilities. But as a college student, my goal was to travel as cheaply as possible. And in many ways that turned into a challenge. So I would challenge myself to see like, all right, how much can I make this trip work with as little as possible? So that's really where learning different tips and tricks of how to find good flight deals. I think flights can be some of the biggest expense of a trip. And over the years, I have definitely learned how to bring that price down. And sometimes it's things that are in our control. Sometimes it's not. For instance, what airport you're searching your departure flight from and arrival flights has a big impact on the cost of the flight. The busier the airport, the more competition, the lower the flights are going to be. So that's a big one. Even how to pack a certain bag, baggage fees tend to add up a lot for a trip. So learning how to pack really light, finding types of accommodation or other lodging systems to drive prices down. So I've done everything from couch surfing. I have met strangers, like complete strangers in other countries, and literally stayed in their apartment on their couch, which is sounds very daring, and it is, but it was absolutely fun. To staying in hostels in this big room with like 12 bunk beds to, over time staying in Airbnbs with the host, and just all these different ways of how to make travel affordable. And I think, there's so many different type of travel styles. You have the kind of college backpacker, which a lot of adults continue to travel in that style, if that's what they enjoy. But, the older I get and the more resources I have at my disposal, the more I learn to kind of travel more comfortably, but still do it in affordable ways. So credit card points and credit card hacking is a big way that I think a lot of adults that make a decent amount of money and want to travel affordably but comfortably do. And that is still something that I'm learning right now. And it's fun because you never really master this traveling thing. There's always so much to learn. There's always so many new places to see. You really never get to see it all. And in a way, that thought comforts me.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe, for those two great questions. And I think to follow up on that piece, Romie, I know you mentioned you've traveled to like 41 countries, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
So, and I know 41 countries, like a lot of them are very, very exotic. And, you know, a lot of people expect that when you're traveling, it's going to be super expensive, especially to these places that we consider extremely expensive. So how are you able to figure out like how to travel to these places on that budget and like ensure that you still experience the culture, you know, these international attractions and like these to-dos, but still kept within the budget where you were comfortable and didn't feel like you were breaking the bank?
That's a great question. So a lot of my answers will be based on a very particular context, and that's, you know, from living in the United States. I want to make sure that I frame my answer and all of my answers in this way. And then in particular, now living in Atlanta. So a fun fact, many of you, is there anyone in Atlanta in this room right now? No, nobody? Do you have some Atlanta folks? Who's in Atlanta right now besides me? Oh, Bradley. Oh, great. Awesome, Bradley. Shout out to you. So what I would do is there's a little bit of familiarity that comes with trying, and the Atlanta chapter is deep. I love that. There's a bit of familiarity with knowing kind of the price point of certain destinations. And that's just where a lot of research and reading and self-educating comes in. There are certain parts of the world where the cost of experience, as I like to call, is much lower than others. So kind of step one is figuring out where do you want to go based on the cost of living or the you know, the price points of the day-to-day lifestyle. So that's why certain parts or certain countries really attract budget travelers, other countries attract kind of mid-tier travelers, and then there's some destinations that attract a lot of the luxury travelers for that reason. So that's kind of part one. Part two then is thinking, you know, how am I going to get there? So like I mentioned earlier, flights can be some of the biggest expenses of a trip. And what I typically do is I kind of sandwich trips. So if I know I'm going far across the world, which expectedly has a higher cost of flight, then the next trip I have, I would kind of keep it more local so that, you know, I'm not constantly dishing out hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of dollars on these really expensive flights halfway across the world with these really kind of, what's the best way to describe it? With kind of more demanding trips, because not just, you know, is a flight long and that wears on your body, but you're in different time zones and that affects your circadian rhythm, your hormones. And there's a lot that goes into that. So I try to sandwich my trips so that I have a lot of big trips where I'm flying halfway across the world, kind of spread throughout the year. But then I also try to remember that there's so many great things that are local. So local can be here in the Southeast. It can be just driving to South Georgia and staying a few days down there and kind of exploring a more quiet place. It could be flying to the Northeast or flying to the West Coast. I just got done coming back from a trip from LA, and then I spent some time in Joshua Tree. And that's more of a local trip. And that even wasn't necessarily a cheap trip, but it definitely wasn't as expensive as some trips because the flight over there and kind of the day-to-day costs weren't too expensive compared to some other places. And then after that, it's really just then implementing the different tips and tricks, you know. So when you figure out like, all right, during this month, I want to take a big trip. And part of choosing that destination is going during the shoulder seasons. So staying away from the peak seasons in a certain destination. So I'll use Santorini, for example, because I think that's a good example because they really have kind of 4 seasons. The summertime is going to be the most expensive no matter what. So flights are going to be the most expensive. The rates for hotels and other lodging will be the most expensive. Food and activities will be the most expensive because of just basic supply and demand. But then going during their off season can lead to really poor weather. It can lead to a lot of businesses being closed and a lot of experiences being unattainable because there aren't tourists there. So finding that shoulder season in between the busy season and the slow season is some of the best times to go because things are still really affordable. The flights are way more affordable, but you're able to save money on lodging, experiences, and the flights because there's not as many people competing to go to the same place. So I try to look at the seasonality of a destination when I'm scheduling when I want to go, because that also has a really big impact on affordability. So I kind of let that steer me. I always let the destination or the flight choose me. I never just think, all right, I really want to go to South Korea and I'm just going to take my vacation in August. I don't recommend people do that because now you're sticking to one destination and one, set of dates that you have for PTO, and you have way less options to find more affordable things to do. So I really just try to stay as flexible as possible. And that's kind of one of the biggest tenets of affordable traveling, just staying as flexible as you can.
I like that. You don't choose the flights, you let the flights choose you. I like that one. That's a good one. All right, awesome. So as we're going into that, what would you say are the top 3 travel hacks that everyone should know about based on your own experience that would make their life a little bit easier?
Yeah, so hack number 1, credit card points and transferring the points as miles to airline partners. So that is one of the biggest and kind of most transformative ways that you can travel more cheaply. And there's a lot of travelers who cover entire flights, long haul flights, even just from credit card points transferred to miles. So the 3 cards I recommend are the Chase Sapphire, either the Preferred or the Reserve, the Capital One Venture X, or the American Express Platinum card. And the one you get depends on your lifestyle, how much you spend. I think all 3 of those cards really are for 3 different kinds of people. So there's not a one card fits all. But I know of many other travelers that have at least 2 or more of those cards and then just kind of use them for different things. So that's my biggest hack, credit card points. Use that like cash. So of course, only, spend what you can afford, but use it like a debit card. And that way, every dollar that you spend earns points, which you can then transfer to airline partners that partner with that specific card. Now, another reason, I see a hand.
This is Monica. I might have missed this, so sorry if you already mentioned this, but do you recommend using the airline points as the points or turning it into cash?
Great question. So when you mean turning into cash, so taking the points you've accumulated and then going to the travel portal for that specific credit card?
Yes.
So I don't recommend doing that. I recommend transferring the points as miles to the airline partners for the respective card because you get more value that way instead of using it as cash in the portal.
Okay, so I have my Delta. I got a Delta Gold Amex and the Sky Miles one. And then it said like 750 or 750,000 miles or whatever that equivalent is to $750. And so and that I can reimburse as $750 into my Amex, or I can use them as miles. So you said you recommend the miles?
That is correct. And the reason why is that there are certain flights so the mileage for a flight differs. So the cash value will always remain the same, but the type of flight that you can get with the miles varies. So it's that variable aspect is why I recommend using it as miles, because there are certain flights that for some reason have a really good deal miles wise, and you would end up getting a free round trip flight from wherever you're based. So if that's the Bay Area to, freaking Singapore, and you can get that for free, whereas that $750 would not be able to pay for the cost of that same flight in full.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's a really good question. Happy to answer any other questions about credit cards because I love tactical, excuse me, things, and would love to share any, tips that folks can take away right away.
Awesome. All right. I guess. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Carla.
Okay. Can you go ahead and repeat the cards that you recommended?
Yeah. So I recommend the Chase Sapphire, and there's 2 tiers of that card. The preferred is the lower tier, and I have that card. I've had it for over 5 years now. And then the reserved is the higher tier. It has a higher annual fee, but it does offer a bit more points for every dollar spent. And there's some other perks. So that's the Chase Sapphires. That's kind of the first column. And I think of the Chase Sapphire as more of the entry level travel credit card. A middle tier is the Capital One Venture X, and I would also put the Chase Sapphire Reserved, which is the higher tier Chase, also in that middle tier. So higher annual fee, but you get more value for the points. You also get a lot of really robust perks. And then the high tier would be the Amex Platinum card. So even a higher annual fee, but again, really good point to mileage or point to cash ratio and outstanding perks. So the one you choose really depends on your lifestyle. I have the Capital One Venture X and I have the Chase Sapphire Preferred. At this time, I have decided not to do the Amex Platinum because I don't spend a lot of money. Like I actually just don't swipe my card often, and I just day to day don't spend a lot of cash. However, if you are a big spender, or if you have a type of business, or you're able to use that particular card as a business expense. I know a lot of people who do that. That's a really great way of just spending dollars and getting points on the card. And then the perks with the Platinum, the Amex Platinum, I don't use any of the other perks. The only perks I would really use are just lounge access and global entry membership. But they have a lot of other perks with gyms and Uber and all of these other merchants. And so again, it really just depends on your lifestyle and the kinds of spending habits you already have. Yes, Gabriel, that is a great. Chase Reserve is a magic for my points. Absolutely. Yes. Gabriel, I'll get to your question about Spain or Japan in a second. I would love to answer that. I have a referral for the Chase Sapphire and for the Venture X. If anyone here is interested in applying, I will be happy to share that. Help your girl out. That's a great way for me to get more points so that I could go somewhere. So, we both win from that situation.
Absolutely. Love that. All right. Did you have any more tips you wanted to share as well, Romie?
Yeah. Let me share some other tips, and then I'd love to talk about Japan and Spain. I'm seeing
absolutely. Yeah.
in the chat about Japan and Spain. So the credit card points, I think for this particular demographic, I figured everyone here is a working professional, kind of have that type of lifestyle where you may want to still travel comfortably or even travel luxuriously, but of course, nobody really wants to, build a hole of debt or a mountain of debt. So I think those credit card points is probably the biggest tip. If you take nothing away from this conversation, remember to apply for one of those 4 cards, really, one of those 4 cards, and start just spending it like a debit card. Mm-hmm. Another tip I have is letting the flight choose you. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So if you are, before you put in any type of PTO request, if you have flexibility with your dates, and that's that operative part. If you only know that you can travel within a certain week, then this doesn't really apply. But if you do have a little bit of choice of when you put in your PTO, then I start with finding the flight first and having that be your first step in the trip planning process. So I like Google Flights. Google Flights actually has really gotten more and more sophisticated over the years. So shout out to Google. And in a lot of ways, I think it's a really good competitor to a lot of these third-party online travel agencies or online flight browsers such as Skyscanner, Kiwi, Kayak. And honestly, comparing all those websites, Google Flights offers the same thing because they're also showing different merchants where you can buy the tickets from. So I just say stick to Google Flights at this point. If you want to compare it with skyscanner.com, that's a really popular one in the space, you can, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to see the same flight prices. So I go on Google Flights and I put in my departure city. Another pro tip, if you can be flexible about where you fly out from, do that. Because again, the more options you have, the more space you have to choose the cheapest option. Yes, Southwest does not. So, and honestly, I hate flying Southwest. I never fly Southwest, and I am not much of a Southwest fan. And I find them to be really expensive, which is why I never fly with them. So Monica, I'm gonna get to you in 1 second. Love the questions. So having the flight choose you, so set your departure airport and then just click explore and then just move the map and see where in the world can you go for the cheapest, and then look at those flights and see what those dates are. And sometimes if you can fly from different airports, so if you're based in the Northeast, if you can put Newark, JFK, or even some of the DC airports, Boston even, right? All of those, kind of that whole northeastern part of the country, then you can see that maybe flying from Boston to Ireland is like $300 cheaper than flying from JFK to Ireland. So I have repositioned myself many times before where I would literally leave Atlanta, purchase a whole different flight to get to JFK, and then start my real flight from JFK. So Monica.
Hi. So is it a myth or a fact that if you look up the same flight over and over again on Google Flights, it'll like increase?
It has for me. I cannot technically answer that as a fact or a non-fact, but it absolutely happens to me. But sometimes if I take a break, there's been times where I've taken a break from looking at a certain flight, and then the price went down. And that might have been maybe a 2-week time span, and then it dropped. So I think, we can't really beat cookies, or we can't beat whatever type of algorithm that is embedded in these websites, because these airlines, they are definitely pumping out money, and they know when we're considering a certain flight. So for the most part, if I find a really good deal, I try to book it, because most airlines will let you cancel for a full refund within 24 hours. And I really encourage people to utilize that, because let's say you save it and you save in your little bookmarks, and then you come back 2 days later, it jumps like $150. Happens all the time.
Okay, thank you.
So even when I use incognito, the flight still jumps. The same thing I described, I always look up flights in incognito, and I don't know what type of technology they have. It does not work for me. But if anybody else has tricks about that, maybe I'm using incognito wrong. Carla.
You mentioned a good deal. Is there a reference point or a resource that you have that you use to identify good deals, especially in areas you've never traveled to?
That's a great question. I just look at the cost of flights on the Google Flights calendar, and I look at the other price points. And that's really how I determine whether that's a good deal or not. And then it also just depends on your spending habits and your spending comfortability. I am super cheap. I don't like to spend more than $800 on a flight anywhere in the world. If I'm paying $800, I need to go to Antarctica. Like, I need to go to Australia. I need to go to South Africa. I'm not paying $800 to fly to Europe. I'm not paying $800 to fly to South America. That's not happening. I've paid $500 round trip in 2019 to fly to China. And usually those East Asia flights, at least from the southeast of the US, are, $1,000 and up. I hate paying $1,000 for a flight. I try to avoid it at all costs. But some people may see $1,000 to Cape Town, for instance, and think that's a great deal. So there's just, so much of just traveling and tips is working with your own comfortability and seeing what you'd rather do, because the $800 flight to Cape Town may involve very inconvenient timing, long layovers, and some people, it's just, the energy spent is not worth the money they save. So it really just depends on the person. Bradley?
Do you ever use Scotch Cheap Flights or Flight Direct or any of those
I
services?
love Scott's Cheap Flights. I have a premium membership with them. Thank you for bringing that up because I actually totally forgot to mention that. So I'm really glad you mentioned them. So Scott's Cheap Flights is another great resource. So like people love using Hopper. I personally am not a big fan of Hopper. I don't really use it. I've tried it. I don't really use it. I kind of stopped using Skyscanner. I really just use Google Flights to discover flights. And then I'll use Scott Cheap Flights just to kind of see what kind of deals are going on. But the thing with Scott's Cheap Flights is that a lot of those you have to buy pretty soon. And I don't like to buy impulsively. So I try to plan a little bit first. But for those that don't know, Scott's Cheap Flights is a subscription service. They have a free version where you get a few, emails a day or a few emails a week with flight deals based on the departure city you tell them. Or if you have the premium version, which is really affordable, I think it might only be $30 or $50 a year, then you get a ton of email deals that are sent to you. So I have found a few good ones from Scott's Cheap Flights, but not a ton actually. Yes, it is going.com. I did get that email. They did a whole rebranding. I guess I love Scott's Cheap Flights. I wish they would have kept that branding, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. That Kenya trip had us in transport for 30 plus hours. Goodness, yeah, I can't even imagine how many stops that had. But hey, it may be worth it because flying from the US to Kenya can easily be a $2,000 flight. No, it wasn't. Okay.
No, it really wasn't.
Wait, I'm just catching up on the chat here. Someone said, can you demo letting the flight choose you? Yes, I would love to do that. VPN, I have played around with VPN before. So sometimes changing your location when you're browsing can be helpful, but sometimes it doesn't because some people, people go online and say, yeah, set your VPN that you're in London and, book your flight that way. But then when you get to the payment page and you put in a non-UK credit card, they're going to be like, are you paying with a US credit card? We're going to redirect you to the US version of this website. And then the flight prices can change. So, but I say play around with it. It may work out, it may not. But I typically have not been successful with trying to change my location on my device or IP address rather.
Awesome. All right. So let's dive back into questions to kind of get through a few more stuff. I know people have some burning questions, so hopefully these kind of like spark some new ones. But Romie, I've been following you for a while. We know each other for a little bit now, and you actually have a whole travel business, if people did not know that. And if y'all don't follow her on Instagram, you guys need to follow her on Instagram because her content is amazing. And you do not see a lot of people of color, especially, getting that kind of visibility in this space when it comes to traveling. So can you tell me how you were able to really push your passion into a business and share those experiences with others so folks could know how to travel and travel in a way that they felt comfortable within their own means?
Yeah. So back in 2019, I started planning trips for people because I started posting traveling on Instagram and people would reach out and they would, ask questions. And then I saw that there was an interest for just learning and knowledge sharing. And as an educator, because I am an educator by profession, and there's always a teacher in me that comes out in my personality. I just love to share that information and to learn myself from others. So I started offering to plan trips for people, and I did that for maybe about half a year, and then stopped that because I was prepping for grad school and I just felt overwhelmed and I didn't really have a really good system in place to maximize my efficiency with that business. So I stopped doing that. And from there, I just kind of treated travel as a hobby and I focused more on content creation. So blog writing, Instagram, YouTube. I dabbled in TikTok for a bit, but I'm not as active on TikTok anymore. And I am starting to build a community on ByteDance's newest platform. So like a sister platform of TikTok called Lemonade. Some people here may have already heard of it, and have just been posting travel content mostly on my YouTube, Instagram, and Lemonade. And now it just, for the past maybe, I kind of took a break from posting during COVID for about a year and a half. And then really from the start of 2022. So really from January 2022 until now. So about almost a year and a half, I just started posting consistently. Wasn't earning anything from it. Wasn't monetizing anything. I just loved the hobby. It was fun to make reels and to take photos and to edit and to write captions and to engage with this online community via DMs, comments, Instagram stories. And then as of, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago, I just started making a ton of money from content creation, and just had a lot of influencer or like digital marketing agencies reach out to me to do different partnerships, paid partnerships. And it's really surreal to just even say that out loud, because for so long I didn't think that was going to be possible, or that social media is so overly saturated and that it's really difficult to actually earn cash from posting, because there's so many accounts that are humongous with hundreds of thousands of followers, and what kind of reach do I have? So I don't know if it's something about follower count or just posting consistently, but already in the month of May, I have 3 different paid contracts, and it's decent money. It's not like, here goes $100 for a reel. It's decent money, and I'm hoping that can continue, because I'm going to post regardless. So it's nice to earn a little bit of cash in exchange for that time, and I'm just really thrilled just to continue doing that.
I love that. I think it just speaks volume, because you're so genuine. You don't gatekeep any of these your experiences, or in general just like what it is that you've learned. And I think that's now the universe is now paying you back in that sense. So I'm really happy to hear that. So that's what's up. Love that. So you mentioned that you're an educator. You travel a lot. So how do you balance working from home, like working remotely, and then traveling the way that you travel? Like, tell me, how are you able to like keep that going and like keep your sanity?
Yeah. So in 2019, when I really started to travel really consistently, like once a month type of consistent and post, that's kind of when, that's actually when Roaming with Romie started, like that entire username. That's when I started using it in 2019. And I was a traditional classroom teacher. So I taught in person, and I leveraged long breaks and holiday weekends. And then on top of that, we also had PTO and sick days. So I would, PTO stack and take a PTO day and stack it on an already long holiday weekend or an already long break to give myself even longer time away from the schoolhouse. So that's what I started doing. And, there wasn't a ton of time to like recover, but I think the momentum and just the adrenaline kept me going. Now, 4 years later, recovery is such a thing for me. Maybe it's just because I'm older and I'm just an old lady now, but man, after every trip, I'd be out the next day. Like I'd be out of commission. But when I was a teacher, oh goodness, I would land on a Sunday evening or Sunday night and literally get up at 5:30 a.m. the next day so I could be at work and teach these kids by the first bell. Yeah, definitely am not in shape like that, like I used to be. But now I work remotely, and will always work remotely. I think the normalization of remote work because of the pandemic, as tragic as a thing that it is, really normalized some things. And one of those things is remote work. So ever since grad school, ever since, right after grad school, I've always held remote positions. And I think that has been a game changer, integral to my travel lifestyle. And then only very recently, recently, as in September 2022, I left a full-time traditional corporate role for an ed tech company, which was remote, but pretty standard expectation in terms of the 40 hours a week, being on call, Monday through Friday, PTO. And I took a big trip to Asia, and I realized that that type of role wouldn't fit my lifestyle, or the type of lifestyle that I was trying to achieve. So I ended up resigning and just kind of took the risk of finding multiple contractor or part-time roles, and roles specifically that allowed me to choose when I work. So instead of being expected or available Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 p.m. local time, I wasn't on call anytime unless I had a meeting scheduled. So that meeting could be, 9 p.m. on a Wednesday, or I might have 2 meetings on a Wednesday night and have the day of Wednesday free. And I might be out in LA doing hikes all day, or I might be in New York hanging out around town, catching a matinee musical, and then we'll come back to the hotel or Airbnb and work at nighttime. And I wasn't able to do that with the prior traditional corporate role. So that's what I do now. I have multiple part-time and multiple contractor roles that really allow me to work whenever I want. So there are some weekdays where I just get up, I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like doing anything. I feel tired. I'm going to rest. And I will literally lay down in bed all day on a Tuesday and watch TV and read. Whereas before I would have to, have Slack open on my computer or on my phone at 9 a.m. sharp. And then other times I'll decide, all Saturday night, I'm going to work, I'm going to catch up on emails, I'm going to make content, or I'm going to schedule calls. And then I'm able to do that. So that has really helped me travel more often because, for instance, a lot of cheaper flights are during the week when a lot of leisure travelers are not flying. So I will literally get on a flight all day on a Wednesday because no one's checking for me. I don't have to report to a supervisor. And then we'll work on the weekend. Or I'll get up really, really early in the morning, depending on which time zone I'm in, knock out some emails, maybe even schedule a meeting, and then literally not touch my computer for the rest of the day. So the kind of that schedule changes from day to day, week to week, but I just kind of shape it to whatever need I have in that moment.
Love that. Okay. And then final question from me, and then we can go into the questions from the group in the chat. What are your favorite budget airlines, especially when traveling internationally?
Okay, so it depends on the part of the world that you're in. So in the US, I have always enjoyed and have always had pleasant experiences with Spirit. I'm a big Spirit flyer. And Spirit actually just recently started an airline, kind of membership, rewards membership. So similar to some of the mainline carriers. I now have like a free Spirit number and I'm able to accrue miles, which is great. I also like Frontier. I like Frontier. I fly Frontier. Every time I go to Jamaica, I fly Frontier because they have a direct flight from Atlanta to Kingston, and that's really convenient for my needs. In Europe, I wouldn't say I really like this airline. I haven't flown them in a long time, so I don't know how they are now, but Ryanair is a classic. That is a great budget airline because when I tell you like 2016, 2017 prices, like spending $40 to fly from London to Greece, like that's not necessarily a short flight, right? But it's $40 round trip. You can't beat that. I would, assume now with inflation, it's still higher, but it's still cheaper than what you would find with some of the legacy carriers. In Asia, and let me go back to Europe. So Ryanair, there are so many other budget airlines, but so many of them go out of business. I'm not sure which one.
I've heard of French. I've heard of French.
New one. That's a new one, and that's really good for like they have a hub and they do some direct flights to Miami, New York, I think LA, and that's really good if you want to head to Paris or some of the other like secondary cities in France. But that's a great way. Like for instance, I will use an airline like French Bee to get to Europe to start like a Europe trip. So you could start in Paris so that your transatlantic or Trans-Pacific, wherever you're going in the world. Flight is relatively affordable, and then you're able to catch trains, regional trains, or other budget airlines to make a really affordable trip. TAP Portugal. That's a really good one for the US as well, because they have a few routes where they fly in the US and they tend to be really cheap. So if you're in the Southeast, if you look into Miami International, TAP Portugal flies to Miami International a lot, and they have some really affordable flights to Europe. Turkish Airlines is another flag carrier that has really good flights to parts of the world from the United States. So I would look into Turkish, and they're not and TAP Portugal and Turkish are not budget airlines. They are flag carriers, but they have some really affordable. They have, oh no, I'm sorry if you had a bad experience on Turkish. They're not like a luxury airline by any means. Like, they're not your Qatars. They are not your Emirates, but they are a mainline carrier with some decently priced flights. So if you're in Asia, when I was in Asia last year, I flew AirAsia everywhere. So that is Asia's budget airline. And some of the individual countries have their own. Like when I was in Thailand, I flew NOC Airlines. That's like Thailand specific budget airline. But AirAsia is a big conglomerate, and they have a lot of like super affordable flights. I'm talking like $60 to fly from Singapore to Bali. So really, really affordable stuff. And then in Central America, I like Volaris. It's a Mexican airline.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
They're a Mexican budget airline, and they are you do not feel like you're on a budget flight. Like when I flew Volaris, they give you a whole like 16-ounce soda. They give you the whole bottle. They give you these big bags of chips for your snack. Like, you're actually getting the snack service on Volaris. And I believe I was able to bring a carry-on free of charge as well. And then I can't speak too much for South America. Copa is pretty good for like Central and South America. LATAM is good as well. Avianca will be more expensive because that's more of a luxury carrier. And then when I was in Colombia, Colombia has a budget airline called Viva, and they go to some other countries in South America as well. So that's another airline to look into. That's hilarious. Okay, sorry, that was a long question, but I just want some takeaway, like actual hard answers for folks to.
Absolutely. No, those were great. So thank you very much. So I think the group is dying to hear your answer about flight tips for Spain or Japan. We have 2 trips coming up later this year. And I think they just want to learn a little bit more about like your experience or any tips that you may have to help them, navigate it a little bit better.
Absolutely. Well, the first question is, when are those trips? Because that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Gabe, you want to go into the details of it?
Yeah, I got to get the specific dates. Japan's like around November 11th, 19th. Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong. He's also planning it.
That's correct.
And then the Spain trip, which is going to be Madrid, Barcelona, Ibiza, is late September to early October. So like the 25th
like
to the
September
4th of October. Yeah.
Those are good. Those are good. Those are so the Spain, that's definitely a shoulder season. That's a great time of year to go to really anywhere in Europe. I can't speak as confidently to Japan, but it's right before the US holidays, so that may not be bad either. So my biggest tip would be the credit card points, especially for Japan. The flights for Spain may be a better use of just paying that in cash, but with Japan especially, that may be a good idea to go and transfer some of those credit card points so that you can lower that cost. If you can fly out of SFO or LA or LAX, you are in luck because you're going to have cheaper flights. If you can reposition yourself perhaps to SFO or LAX, maybe again by using credit card points and either booking it as cash on the credit cards portal, because each of those credit cards will have their own travel portal where you book flights and hotels and car rentals, or even transferring it as miles to an airline partner. And all of those are free. All you have to do is go down the list of partner airlines and make a free account Just put in your personal information, then you're able to start accruing points. And the airlines that partner with the card depend on the card. So Amex, the Amex Platinum has their own airlines they partner with, and those look different from the airline partners for the Chase, and that looks different from the VentureX. So do your research with those 3 cards. And if you have a preference towards certain airlines, then I would recommend getting the card that partners with your airlines of choice. So the first step would be to take those dates, and what I would do. So I'm such a teacher. Should we do some live demos?
Yes, please. I'm trying to see so I can tell my manager the flight chose me.
I love this stuff. I'm nerding out here. I'm being such a teacher. So I'm so sorry if I'm overdoing it.
Oh no, this is great.
Okay, let me just go to Google Flights, and then I'll share my screen. All right, so let's look at Japan is November 11th through the 18th. So that's when the trip starts. So folks need to be in Japan by the 11th.
Yeah, so you got to fly it on the 10th, so you can arrive on the 11th.
Okay, and you all are starting in Tokyo, I'm assuming?
Mm-hmm. HND.
Gotcha. Oh, so only that airport, because Tokyo has 2 that serves the city.
Yeah, we're focused on HND just to make it a little easier logistically to get people to and from.
Got it. No problem. So what I'm going to do, so I don't think with Google Flights, you have to put a departure city. So where's everyone? I know we have an Atlanta chapter. I know we got LAX in the house. I know we got SFO. We have Austin. I know Austin is in the house.
Cincinnati.
We have, you're not flying nowhere from Cincinnati, sorry.
I'm swearing. I'm sorry.
You're gonna have to, whoever's Cincinnati in here, you're gonna have to fly somewhere else in the US, honey.
It's not the easiest flying from Cincinnati.
Oh boy. I actually was one of the clients I'm working for, I have to book flights for speakers for this conference. And we have a speaker coming from they're not coming from Cincinnati, they're coming from Columbus, but still that's kind of a secondary airport, secondary cities. And oh boy, when I tell you that flight for literally Columbus, Ohio to Miami was like almost $600. And our other speakers who live in major cities such as Dallas, New York, Atlanta, I mean, a quarter of the price. So yeah, whoever's in Cincinnati, I'm sorry, Monica. We'll
Could you try?
Case.
Yeah, can you try Rochester, New York? I might be moving there.
Sure. You're better off going to JFK or Newark, but I will put Rochester.
No, but those are so far.
You're going to have to just drive or take that bus or train and stay with some friends. Make a trip out of it. What I do when I reposition myself, I make a trip out of the repositioning. So if I'm going from Atlanta to JFK, I'm going to hang out in JFK for 2 days, crash with a friend. I recommend crashing, like going to a city where you have friends that you can crash with, or places where you can find a cheap Airbnb for 2 nights or even 1 night, and then starting your trip. So let's do, I know we have an Austin. It also might be worth looking from DFW and even Houston, because Austin's not going to have very competitive flights. Maximum number of locations selected. Okay, so let's start with this. So we have New York people. Yes, I see people.
Yeah.
There's some New Yorkers going to Japan.
Yeah, so maybe we could, unless you want to take out one of the Texas people and put in New York.
There's no tech. So besides Austin, there's no other Texans. Okay.
Nah.
There's Austin and then Val. Where are you? Val, Dallas. I think Val's still on the call.
You have a
yeah.
Dallas?
Dallas. Yeah.
San
Antonio. Not a major airport. You're not going to get it. Same thing with like Rochester, even Austin. You're not going to get a good flight. All right, let's go to HND, and then we're flying out on the 10th, and then we're flying back on the 18th.
The 19th.
The 19th. Gotcha. All right, let's see what we have here. LAX. LAX. Oh, we even have a LaGuardia. That's not bad for our northeastern based folks. So typically what you'll see, this is actually not too bad for a Japan round trip. Typically anything that is under $1,200, in my opinion, is a good deal, because flying to Tokyo can easily run anywhere from $1,500 up, especially this time of the year, because again, this is not necessarily a shoulder season, and a lot of people are starting to travel from the US. So that US market, they're starting to travel a lot mid-November until early January. So that entire 2.5 months is a peak for US travelers. So this is actually not too bad. But let's take a look at, oh, this is a nonstop. That's actually not bad at all. So let's see what the return looks like. Okay. And yes, and that's great because that is directly with the airline, which I always recommend. So this already is a pretty good deal. Now, let's say that you're like, I don't know if I want to spend $1,000 on this flight, then I would recommend looking into the credit card points. Now, if you don't mind, another option is it's flying outside of the dates of the trip. So flying before and or leaving later. And that can also possibly open up some cheaper flights. So that just depends. So let's look, Bradley.
I just wanted to do a plug on one thing you said earlier about transferring credit card points to airline miles. Delta had a really good deal round trip for this flight out of LAX for like 60,000 miles. So yeah,
That's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah, no, 60,000. I mean, typically for the West Coast to East Asia, so like Japan, China, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, you're definitely looking at like 80,000 miles and up. So that's not bad. So anybody here who has a Delta Sky Miles account, again, it's free. None of these memberships cost money. Definitely take a look at that. Rachel, I see you. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna also plug, they also have a current deal. Well, not even a deal. I think it's not going to be permanent, where they give you 25% off using your miles if you use your like American Express card of any kind, gold and upwards. So that's also another like big perk that they're bringing in too.
Absolutely. That reminds me, if you are airline loyal, so let's say you really love Delta, then getting the Delta MX is a good idea. If you're not as airline loyal and you're fine flying different airlines, depending on just what's cheapest, then the Amex Platinum would be a good idea. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It was so great connecting, Val. Have a good one. So for instance, so on this calendar, you can just play around to see, what some other options are. Right now, there's not a huge difference. Like, yeah, you might be able to save $50, $70, and it may not be worth the cost of having to stay in Japan longer because the price point in Japan is high. Accommodation costs a lot, transportation costs a lot, food costs a lot. It's a higher cost of living. So you just have to balance out what makes more sense. Or if you're going to Vietnam, for instance, or Bali, where the cost of lodging is extremely cheap to the, American traveler, then it may make sense to fly out or to stay days before, days after. So again, that's where what I was saying earlier, there's so many different moving parts, and you just have to compare all of these elements and see what will make the most sense for you.
Awesome. I didn't even know there was this grafting that you could use. So
you didn't know about the price calendar? Oh, I love the price calendar.
I was choosing the flight. The flight wasn't choosing me.
The price calendar has literally told me when I'm going to fly, because I would just move around the departure and return and just choose the cheapest one. Like, for instance, we have this one, but you would be in Japan for a while. So you're leaving on the 7th, probably will arrive on the 8th, but you don't fly back until the 23rd. Yeah. So, but some people like to go on their own adventure after the group trip. So again, that can be an option. If you already want to explore more, then that can be really helpful.
Awesome. All right. Well, Thank you, Romy. This was super, super helpful. I feel like a lot of us gained so much knowledge where it came to this travel game. And I'm sure we're gonna like be hitting you up in the future to potentially help plan some trips for us, or utilize your services. So I really appreciate you taking the time to just chat with us today and like share your own experience and tips and tricks. And yeah, like we'll be able to share this recording afterwards with everyone. And if you have any resources whatsoever that you want to share that you think would be nice to share, like through email, please feel free to send those over and we can do that. But I think I speak on everyone's behalf that this was an amazing chat, and like we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today too.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I was talking a lot, but I'm just very passionate about this just industry. And I just want to see more young people, more people of color, just really out here experiencing the world. So please connect with me on my Instagram. That's where I'm most active. I answer every single DM. I don't ignore nobody. I have no like unread messages. So I love just answering questions and helping people out. So I hope to see some new followers, and I would love for y'all to just keep connecting with me, and I would love to connect back.
Love that. Thank you.
Gosh, DM's open. Not that I don't mean it like that. Hold on.
No. Don't let me come over there now, Bradley.
Wait. That was actually, yeah, y'all are a funny bunch. I need to come with y'all. Y'all are hilarious.
Oh man, no, absolutely. But thank you again. We're gonna stop this recording, so thanks for everyone joining. We'll share this out after the fact, and yeah, we're good to go.
Awesome, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.